Counselor Shepard?
Present.
Counselor Page? Counselor Loop? Counselor Tesdale?
Here.
Counselor Smith? Counselor Nielsen?
Present.
Mayor Trett?
Second. Aye.
Yeah, so since the last meeting, the only change I made, because we didn't have final numbers on the water rate study, I went ahead and conservatively added 56,000 in water revenue, and then put 27,500 in the water reserve fund because of the loan covenant that requires that. And then the balance of 28.5 went into the water fund contingency. So, and then also at the last meeting, we asked to have an additional 10,000 moved from the general fund to the street fund. So those are the only changes that have been made. Yeah. Counselor Shepard?
Aye.
Counselor Page? Aye. Counselor Tesdale?
Aye.
Counselor Smith? Aye. Counselor Nielsen?
Aye.
Mayor Trett?
This time we're going to hold a public hearing to adopt the 2023-2024 budget. I'll adjourn the council meeting and open the public hearing at 3:04 p.m. This is an opportunity for the public to comment or testify on the proposed budget. This time I am asking for public testimony on the proposed budget.
So moved.
Counselor Nielsen moves to adopt resolution 652. Second?
Second.
Second, Counselor Shepard. Discussion. Clerk call the roll.
Counselor Shepard?
Aye.
Counselor Page? Counselor Tisdale?
Aye.
Counselor Smith? Counselor Nielsen?
Aye.
Mayor Trett?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously, one absent. I have a motion to adopt resolution 653, adopting the budget, making appropriations, and closing and categorizing the tax fiscal year 2023, 2024. So moved. Counselor Page moves to adopt resolution 653. Second? Second. Second, Counselor Smith. Discussion? Clerk call the roll.
Counselor Shepard?
Aye.
Counselor Page? Counselor Tisdale?
Aye.
Counselor Smith? Counselor Nielsen?
Aye.
Mayor Trett?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously, one absent. Do I have a motion to adopt resolution 654, declaring the city's election to receive state share revenues? So moved. Counselor Page moves to adopt resolution 654.
Second.
Second, Counselor Tisdale. Discussion? Clerk call the roll, please.
Counselor Shepard?
Aye.
Counselor Page? Counselor Tisdale?
Aye.
Counselor Smith? Counselor Nielsen?
Aye.
Mayor Trett?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Do I have so moved to adopt the budget? Thanks. Moving on to other business, direct award guidance for expanded water treatment capacity. Mr. Del Moro. Thanks for making me drive up.
No problem. So this one, and I apologize for kind of late notice of dumping this on you. We won't necessarily be signing anything today, but we do need to at least make some decisions regarding direction that we go. For a while, we have been working to get a FEMA project approved for expanding the temporary water system. Right now, you guys are limited to about 70 gallons a minute. For very short periods of time, that can be pushed up to 80, maybe 90 gallons a minute. But the hope is to avoid an issue that happened like this past winter where there's a leak and the treatment plant can't keep up. That 70 gallon a minute plant was really designed for when the city was operating at about 160 to 200 connections, not 360 connections. So that has made it through FEMA at this point, and they have approved the project for a second rental system that would double your treatment capacity from 70 up to 140 gallons a minute. What they haven't done is that's in their costing, so that basically that starts with FEMA to review the project for whether or not they agree that this is a needed project, and we've cleared that part. They've agreed that this project is needed. So now it's at the costing section where they go through and say, all right, how much should this project cost and what are we willing to pay? That's where it is now, and we have not heard back on that yet. I do have the proposal here for doing that. Basically, it's going to be similar to what you guys currently have up there. The rental is $15,250 per month, and that gets you the skid. You still have to pay some fixed costs. That is the payment for the membrane modules themselves, the cartridges that get mounted on the skid, that the city will own, unless at the end of this FEMA requires them to be given back. Those are $3,200 per module, and there are 3 modules, so it's going to be about $9,600 for those. There's an additional cost for field service from West Tech, and that's in the amount of $9,000 or $9,070, and that covers them flying up to Detroit, having their programmer out here for a couple of days, starting up the equipment and getting it operational. And then there's the freight costs, which are estimated at $5,000 to ship the equipment from Utah. Those are the fixed costs, so that all comes to about $22-ish, $23,000, plus the first month's rent of $15,250. That's for the equipment itself. And then you have the cost to pipe it, with having a contractor do the piping, tie it back into the system. The idea is we would get another carport, the same carport that's up there right now, just put it right next to the one that's up there and just expand that, so extend it instead of having two separate units, it'd just be one longer unit we'd be adding on as needed, and then putting siding to enclose that in. Budgetary number on that, I would expect, my guess is 20 to 30,000 for that. That number is probably a little high, admittedly, but I'm trying to be a little conservative until we have a number written from the contractor in front of us. So that brings you to about $50,000 to $60,000 to get it up and running. But that would double the treatment capacity, which I think would be a good thing for the summer, so we don't run into any issues with being without water. Yes, so that is not factored into that cost. That is part of the FEMA cost, or the FEMA project that we've proposed. I figure that's going to be a little bit of a secondary priority here. The treatment capacity is going to be a little bit more important, at least for the summer months. The extra storage will come in handy towards the end of the summer and into the winter. So it's kind of one of those, both would be a really good thing for the city to have, but if we can get one of them operational, that takes a lot of pressure off. So that's kind of where we're at. I reached out to the city attorney for procurement on that. Basically, FEMA's only requirement really for reimbursement is that you follow your procurement policy. There's not really any issues on the state and federal level. You guys, well, I should ask, the emergency declaration is still in place, correct? Okay, so from that front, you're fine from a state and federal level. The city does have a little bit more strict policy requirements for sole sourcing than the state and the federal government do, which is a separate issue that should probably be looked into rewriting that policy in the future. So for that reason, I don't know that we could necessarily go the emergency route, but there is another route that basically 3 conditions must be met. And that's first, the lack of bids will not result in favoritism or substantially diminish competition in awarding the contract. Really, the idea there is that there's pretty much only one person who can supply this right now. There are others. It's very likely that it would be more expensive because now you're asking some other manufacturer with proprietary equipment to try and tie into an existing system that uses their own proprietary equipment. And that's for the equipment itself. And then for the construction contract, you have a contractor there currently on site. And they're very likely to be cheaper than anybody else, in the fact that they've already got all their equipment out there, they're mobilized on the site, they've got the materials on site, and they can just get it done. And that kind of goes into item B, the exemption will result in substantial cost savings. And the alternative to that is if you don't do anything. This is a little bit of a tricky situation because you have a state of emergency in the sense that there was an emergency and you are currently operating on, I think it's like 25% or less of your pre-fire treatment capacity. So you are still under an emergency. but we're also forecasting into the future, because we can't guarantee that you will run out of water until it happens, but once it happens, you can't bring treatment equipment on site the next day. That's not something you can necessarily just respond to in the moment. You would likely be without water for a period of 3+ weeks, which means you're trucking water up. The cost to truck water up would be way larger than the cost that we're talking about here. And then from a construction perspective, again, you're using a company that's already has their equipment on site. Their cost to integrate into the existing on-site equipment is going to be less because they already have all of that set up. And from a contractor's perspective, you're utilizing the contractor who's already there to try and reduce the amount of costs to the public, to have mobilize somebody else to the site. I mean, ideally what you would be doing is you would be asking them for a quote. They would provide you the quote, and then we would kind of go from there. So they would know that from that perspective that it's not a competitive sealed bidding. There is the option for issuing quotes, requesting from other contractors saying, hey, send me your quotes. Usually that's a 2 to 3 week, 2's on the short end, but about a 3-week process, 2 if we're really cutting it short, to get quotes from other contractors. So basically what you would do is you'd say, hey, give us a quote, and if they give something that just looks out of control, the city's not locked into that quote. At that point, you can then say, hey, we're going to ask for quotes from other contractors at this time.
And so, another question I've got is, Cindy, what we're essentially looking at here is kind of jumping the gun without confirmation that we have FEMA funds or how much we have.
Correct.
If FEMA does what we assume they're going to do, which approve all of the, or most money lines, how long does it take for that flow to get moving in the event we move ahead with this? I mean, are we talking maybe 6 months, or what's the projection?
So I might defer to Michelle a little bit on this because I wasn't involved too much in the reimbursement of the first round of emergency projects. Do you know about how quickly they were able to get money back on that, or have you been reimbursed for the emergency projects from FEMA? You haven't yet? Okay, so then it could be a while, and the process would then be you could reach out to Business Oregon and see, did we close out that special public works bridge loan by any chance? We did? Okay. Well, so we could talk to Business Oregon or talk to FEMA and say, look, we need this, and kind of get an idea from them. I guess I don't have a great answer on how long it would take them because obviously we're still waiting on funds from the first time, and we're still in EHP review for the permanent work, but I wouldn't really want to compare it to the permanent work because that's just a slower moving process in general. So you could be waiting for months. I would not expect it to be necessarily a rapid reimbursement. So I don't think so. Obviously, there's inherently some risk to the city in that they haven't said what they would cost yet, or what they would approve from a cost perspective. I would not even consider bringing this to council if they hadn't approved the project already. So they've already said, yes, this treatment plant expansion is necessary. We will cover it. They just haven't said a dollar figure cost estimate associated with that. So there's some guarantee in the sense that they've already approved the project. There's just a little bit of risk that they could come back and say, no, like this cost estimate you guys have given is way too high. We don't think it should cost that much. We'll give a lower dollar figure back to the city. Right.
Yes. We do have insurance money, yes.
So it's kind of, the question then becomes to council is, we've kind of got this to a point where they've approved the project. How quickly is council comfortable moving on this project? Do you want to wait, knowing that that does open up a little bit of risk that we could run into some water shortages over the summer? Now, obviously, before water just dries up entirely, we would start with conservation requirements, but that's the risk on one hand, is that you start having to put water conservation requirements in place, and then potentially get more and more strict as things go. Or the other side of the coin is, if you aren't moving early, well, that's if you don't move early. The other side is, if you move early, then potentially some of those costs may not be reimbursed by FEMA. So, and that's why the decision doesn't necessarily have to be made right now, but if you do want to go forward with something, there needs to be a public hearing, as a public hearing, and then a contract review board meeting to discuss the contract, and that would have to be at a later date. So that's really what we need now is, do we want to go ahead and set those dates up in the coming weeks so that we can get the ball rolling, or do you want to wait further until we hear back from FEMA?
Well, I do. I've got one. Just to back up a minute, we first got the water treatment system in at a lower level because we didn't know how many hookups we'd have later on.
The first time around, it was, we have no water, let's find whoever has something. And then we found the 70 gallon a minute and said, all right, the 70 gallon a minute will work in the meantime. Let's get this in place, and then hopefully things will have cleared FEMA and we can have the permanent equipment back, which we just cleared EHP review on Monday, so we're getting to that point, but we have not yet cleared that point with FEMA. Or if we don't have that in time, then we need to look at expanding the temporary capacity, which is where we're at now.
Okay, because now we have more folks. People bought properties, they want to hook up, and now there's going to be serious water shortages. And then if we're trying to adjust our water rates, I say we go for it sooner than later, this expansion, because if we're trying to do the right thing with water rates and we have to say you can't use your water, I don't think that's going to be it. That's going to pass.
I think the greater risk falls on the side of what was just articulated by Councilor Tisdale. I think we should move forward with the project.
Yeah, I'll reach out. I'll reach out to them. That also kind of brings up I guess, the technical question, because this is also going to have a 90% FEMA coverage, 10% local coverage, so there is still a local match. We've used the City Hall donation up until this point to offset water system costs. This is technically separate from that. So I think it would be possible, if I'm not mistaken, there's that, I'm spacing out which it was from, but I think it's 150 or 250.
It's 150, I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, there's a grant.
That we could use as the local match here, because at this point we're well in excess of, with donated materials, of what we would need for the local match on the water treatment plant process, or the water system project. But yeah, I'll reach out to Business Oregon, see if they've got any bridge loans or anything of that sort, if we need it, yeah. Right. Yeah. So I think the next steps in this is to have have a public hearing and convene the contract review board to discuss the exemption to competitive bidding.
Counselor Shepard,
Aye.
Counselor Page, Counselor Tesdale,
Aye.
Counselor Smith, Counselor Nielsen,
Aye.
Mayor Trett.
Motion passes unanimously, one absent. And now we could, I suppose, under this business, start to plan out when we want to do that, or is that something you want to come back to this with? We don't need a motion to do that.
I would kind of defer that to you guys as soon as you can or want to. I think we're probably getting to the point where having it ready for the 4th of July is slightly less likely than not. So it probably won't happen, but I mean, kind of we'll, as soon as that public hearing is met and the contract review board approves it, pending public comment, then we would just get contractors moving as quickly as possible.
We're meeting on the 13th anyway, and half of that schedule has been cleared. So why wouldn't we just move it into?
Great idea.
I agree.
To me, there's a sense of urgency about this whole thing, so a week doesn't seem too bad. But I don't think you could do it sooner. Yeah.
It would have to have a public hearing component.
You're here.
Does that give us enough time to give notice?
I do think so. I would confirm with Monahan on that, but when I asked Monahan about public hearings, he said there wasn't really any requirement outside of about 24 hours. I'd like to give people as much time as possible. But I would confirm with Monahan on that one. I don't think you'll be able to run it in the paper.
But we can put it on our website and, yeah.
Right.
Okay. That got moved.
So what I heard was we're going to use a combination of our website and social media, and that'll be adequate to meet the requirements.
I would, yeah, confirm that with
notice.
Monahan, but I believe so.
Okay. Well, good. I'd hate to see it drag on another 2 or 3 weeks. It seems like every time we get in this situation, bingo, it's a month out.
Right. Nope, you could do it all then. But at that afterwards, again, pending no backlash or public comment that would change anything, then you would go and actually review those contracts. So we'll try and get a quote put together from the contractor and have all that information for, hopefully they can get it by Tuesday. Yep.
I wouldn't mind making an announcement, if it's appropriate, regarding the city visioning project that we've been talking about, thinking about, and processing for, I think, since January or February. I was notified yesterday that we actually have Sarah Designs and Architecture under contract. I received a scope of work which Councilor Tesdale and I will meet about with Kelly Weiss and a number of other people, including the consultant project leader, probably next week, if schedules can come together, and begin that process to refine the scope of work and then begin to interact with the community in terms of soliciting input, not just from the business owners, but from those who recreate in our community as well. So it's an exciting time, and it's nice that we finally reached this point, and I just wanted to let you all know that.
Since we've received a fair amount of money from the permits for golf carts and ATVs, I was wondering if some of that money could be directed to the street budget, since they're using city streets. And